Gentlemen, I'm going to go through a live deal. So I just talked with a tenant called Georgia who was interested in a $200,000 home. They had roughly $15,000 to put down, which puts them roughly at 7%. And they wanted to pay roughly $2,000 a month because they were making around 8 grand. Now, if an investor was buying this home, I'm kind of ignoring everything on the right, but if I'm just going down the left side, if an investor is buying this home, if it's here so this one was actually located in Fargo, North Dakota, and I'm going to assume that someone can do this as a conventional loan, which would roughly be 20% down, 30-year AM. This would be our estimated buyback price for the tenant. So you can see if they're buying it for $200,000, they'd have the option to buy it back for $218,000 in the first year or in the first 18 months, and then roughly another 4% onto that. So maybe 225 in the next 3 years. So then I'm going to come into here. I'm going to type in North Dakota, and you'll see how the property taxes will kind of change and estimate based on the state. So if I were to, just pick Missouri, this number should be changing. So I'll have to go through and fix what that number is. So I'm going to pick North Dakota, and I'm going to estimate 1% on the property taxes for the home insurance. I'm going to keep that there. Going at overall management and operating expenses, you could estimate this as 15%, you could change it to 10%, and then the rent credits are how much the tenant would get back if they purchased the home. And then here would be the investor's initial buying costs for the home. And then this is kind of a scenario. So if I'm closing these up, so here's kind of the pro forma for this type of a deal. So your cash needed would be roughly 28 grand. Now this cash is offset by the fact that the tenant is bringing down 7%. So imagine you're bringing 20, they're bringing in 7. So there's, roughly 13% that you would need to bring down plus some closing costs. So that's where we get the 28,000. Your monthly cash flow is factoring in this 15% of vacancy plus the $2,000 a month in rent. So you get almost a 10% cash on cash ROI. If they were to buy the home from you in that 18-month, here would be your total profit and your annualized ROI. And then what we've done here is if the tenant doesn't buy, what would be your future, some different closing costs. So right now their ballpark credit score was roughly 625. You could estimate what the home appreciation is if you sold this home in the future. These are we're just estimating some seller costs, and let's assume that they completely trashed the place and you had to put 11 grand into it. How would those numbers impact some different scenarios? So what we've done here, even though this is your pro forma, assuming that they potentially buy the home, we've kind of done some different scenarios of, okay, what if they buy the home at 12 months, buy it at 24, buy it at 48, but what if they leave at 24, 12, 24, and 48 months? Kind of based on if them leaving being kind of the worst case scenario, right? So let's say you bought this home for $200,000, you cash flowed $226 a month, and then you had to put 11 grand into it, and then you sold it for $208,000. You would still end up losing money on this property because of, you're going to lose 16 grand here and then 11 grand here. So there's, 27 grand that you're losing that kind of offsets the home appreciation. Now, of course, you could always re-rent this home. You wouldn't have to sell it. If they left at 24 months, you're essentially at a break even. And if they leave after, anything after that, you're kind of at a break even or a positive because the home potentially appreciates. So then we've kind of came up with these example charts of like, okay, what's the probability of an ROI? So there's, maybe if I added, these three up, there's a 60% chance that you're going to get above an 18% ROI. And there's maybe a combined, 14, 13 things. So there's maybe a 26% chance that this either breaks even or loses money. And just trying to be transparent on every scenario that we've seen. And of course, there's options if they buy or leave at 18 months, but we're just kind of trying to paint a picture of the absolute worst case scenario given this tenant's initial. So if I'm looking at this, I'm buying a home for someone that the same day that they move in, I get roughly 15 grand. They're paying $2,000 a month. They're taking care of the home, and then they're buying back the home at a predetermined premium. So that's a quick overview of how the numbers would work. And of course, all of these numbers you can play with if the actual taxes were to change. This kind of, instead of it being $226 a month, you have $184. If the property taxes are less, you can estimate insurance. You could play with, if you're self-managing, if you wanted to change the maintenance and operating, that kind of impacts all of your cash flow. So this was just an example of being able to use this calculator to kind of analyze a deal and explain a little bit of what's going on. So hopefully this is helpful for you to play with this to determine whether or not this is something you'd be interested in doing for your own particular deal.